Yeah. Yes. No? You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, I figured I'd just
Oh,
mute myself until you're ready.
okay, thank you. Well, I'm ready. Is there still an echo now?
No, it's coming in crystal clear.
Ah, that's great. That's great. Well, I think we can kick this off now. So, everybody who is watching already, Mr. Elizondo, he's right here with me. I'm not sure if we're already up, so we can, do a little bit of chit chat right now. So let's talk about the current event the last week. You have been on 60 Minutes. You have been on multiple podcasts. A lot of stuff is happening. Um, you also got some support and also were discredited. How it must have been such a schizophrenic couple of weeks.
Indeed, Max, it has been one wild ride for sure.
Yeah, well, you have become the ambassador of the UAP phenomenon. Um, did you plan on being a ambassador on the scale you are now? Because it's getting
No,
big.
yeah, no, absolutely not, Max. In fact, I wish really somebody else would be able to step up and take my role. But I will tell you, I think you said that I'm the ambassador, and I'll tell you, I think. See, I look at the other way. I think you all are ambassadors. I think every single person that's watching your program right now, I think they're all ambassadors because this is something I've said time and time again. We are only here because of you all. I never would have been able to do this by myself, and so I think it's important that people realize. I mean, I may be the guy whose face is on camera a lot, but in reality, this is a group effort, and we are achieving what we are achieving only
Yes.
because of your involvement and those people that are watching this program. They were every bit as important as I am and Chris Mellon and everybody else. So thank you very much.
Well, as you know, it is my pleasure, but I know for a fact it is all of our pleasure. There has been a great community now, basically born on social media. We are all, following anything and everything. For the ones who actually have a media platform, they keep writing about it. If you would like, I could tell you now in person. After our first interview happened, it was published in the National Dutch magazine. Also, this interview will come in June. And the biggest newspaper picked it up in Holland and hasn't stopped. They haven't stopped writing about it.
Wow. Well, that's a testament to you and your subscribers and everyone over there. I mean, this is I think this is a very compelling issue. It's not necessarily a bad issue or a good issue. It's just an issue, and I think we're at a strategic crossroads right now. I think this is a global issue that we all need to participate in the conversation. This should not be a conversation that is led only by the United States. Frankly, we're a little bit late to the party, to be honest with you. But at least we
then
showed up.
Then I want to know who was first.
Oh my goodness. Well, there's a lot of countries out there. France, for example, has an existing an ongoing effort. You have countries like Uruguay and Argentina and Brazil, and there's a lot of countries that really have really taken the lead on this conversation over the last 20 years, and only now recently the United States is kind of playing catch up. But in reality, we were probably one of the last to come to the party. So I think that honor goes to a whole bunch of other countries besides us.
Yeah, well, I do think did the United States take the countries who were first in investigating the phenomenon seriously? Did they know they were investigating it, and how was their position towards that?
Well, Max, we've had a long history of investigating this topic, UAP,
right?
Whatever they are. We just have never really been very open about it, and I think that's probably where we made our mistake, because that allowed an atmosphere of distrust, and so now that the government is being more open about it, people are still very distrusting. And obviously, once you make that mistake and not being truthful and forthcoming with your citizens, it's hard to regain that trust. And so I think we are moving towards that direction. I think there's an honest effort by our elected officials and our leaders in the government to finally look at this topic in a way that it deserves. But there's a lot of mending of fences that we're going to have to do between now and then in order to regain the public's trust.
Yeah, I think so. But I see this train is picking up speed, and it won't stop anymore. You see, I think it goes so quickly. The people who are getting aware of this is a real thing. To me, it's really funny how people respond to the work I do in Holland. Talking to people like you, they make a certain face. I know if you haven't noticed that, it's like always like this. In parties, at the water cooler, it's like UAP,
right?
This can be real, and then you show them what is actually on the table right now, and they just think there's still going to be someone pulling a rabbit out of a hat or something. Yeah. So to the guys in the chat already, we're officially gonna kick this off in 2 minutes. Because I set the schedule for 8. So I do a proper introduction, for the people who were actually on time, like 8 o'clock. But we will. But thank you for being early, guys. You must have been excited. So am I.
Yeah, Max, you've done an incredible job, and I respect you tremendously. And I think to some degree you're facing the same uphill battle that I was facing 3 years ago when I first came out and tried to have this conversation. People, it was hard for people to be receptive, but I think we are gaining significant ground, and I think you are too. So my hat's off to you.
There's a lot of stuff going on right now. I can tell you all about it, but I would like to share it with you and ask you about it because it's directly related to your work. And 1 minute almost. Okay, so I think I'm gonna kick our interview off with a question a friend of mine is dying to ask you. So in our last interview, you said before you were working for AATIP or were interviewed for the job, not knowing what you were going to do, actually. You said you were just a special agent, a military man, but never had a experience with a UAP or a UFO. That's correct, right?
That is, well, I have never, before being involved with AATIP, I never had any type of interest in science fiction. I didn't have any exposure to the topic of UFOs, and I did not have my own personal sighting.
So here's the question. Now let me get this question right here because I want to ask it correctly. Okay, so in your time with AATIP, you get a lot of footage, a lot of data, but at the time you're working there, did you ever observe with your own eyes and ears something?
Yeah, but I've always been very careful not to talk about it publicly because I don't want my own opinion to skew the facts and the collection of data. It's very important to me that we remain agnostic or neutral in our bias when we're collecting this information. Otherwise, I'm just as guilty as anybody else of superimposing my own potentially my own narrative and biasing the analysis, which is critical that we don't do that.
I know you're in a position, or were in a position you couldn't do that. But now let's forget Lue Elizondo, the Pentagon man, the military man. What did human being Lue Elizondo witness?
Well, again, it's really hard to separate right now Lue Elizondo, the individual, and Lue Elizondo, the person who's talking about this topic in a very public way. I'm not sure we can separate the two right now. It's not that it's necessarily my identity is wrapped up being a public figure. That's not the case. But it would be disingenuous of me to share my own personal observations and thoughts right now at a time where people are looking to me to provide accurate information and data, just the facts. I have to be very careful because my personal views are just that. They're my personal views. And I don't ever want that to be confused with a collection of data. We have seen this community fraught full of people who superimpose their ideas, their thoughts, their narratives as being fact. And that's exactly what's wrong with the UFO community today, ufology. It's because so many people have injected their own narrative, and some may be well-intended, some not so much. But it has really kept this topic from moving forward in the general sphere of conversation because of that. And I don't want to be tempted to do that. As much as people may want to know what Lue Elizondo, the individual, thinks or what he saw, I don't think it would be helpful to the conversation at this stage.
Sure, I do respect, of course, what you're saying, and I absolutely get it. Maybe someday, but we'll move on from here.
Yeah, hopefully someday. I'd love to have that conversation. I don't think now's the time, unfortunately.
Okay, so let me get to the current events, and you had a huge presence in the 60 Minutes. Well, that is the big leaks. And in that interview, you actually called out for now also releasing data alongside the footage. What made you, call out for that in that interview?
Well, because it's part of the discussion. Videos and pictures are only part of the story. They only tell you a very brief moment of time and under very specific circumstances. And what the audience, what the general public lacks is the information surrounding that event. What happened? What were the events leading up to that particular moment in time? What happened afterwards? What else was going on? Who else was on the scene? What other information was being collected, whether radar or other cameras that are on the scene, perhaps, or other eyewitnesses as well? All that information is important if people are to be able to draw their own conclusion. And in order to have a well-informed conclusion, you have to have a lot of data and information in order to be able to come to that type of understanding. I think it's only fair. I also think that some of the best, I hate to use this analogy, but some of the best antiseptic is sunlight. I think transparency on this topic now more than ever is vital if we're going to have a real conversation about it.
Definitely. And I do owe you an apology because on the unidentified celebrity review, I said, please answer the question, which was completely the wrong platform.
No, Max, listen, you don't have to apologize. I didn't take it any way other than a journalist asking an honest question. You should never have to fear that. I did not take it wrong at all. I applauded you asking me the question. I don't think it was inappropriate whatsoever. Please don't feel that way. If anything, I would encourage you to ask more questions, and whatever questions you have, don't hold back. I'll always tell you if I can answer it or if I can't.
Well, and that's what I think is so great. You are so willing to go exactly how far you can go, but then of course you are bound. You have vows, you have contracts. So I immediately respect that. Let me see. Yeah, I saw on Twitter. I saw you posting a picture of yourself. You made a visit to the Congress, and this was about a month ago, I think. And I was wondering, how did that go, and what can we expect?
Well, I think it went. I think it went quite well. I go to DC quite a bit. I'll be going there again here in probably the second week of June. There's a lot of things going on. There's an IG evaluation, Inspector General evaluation that's ongoing. You have questions from Congress. You have questions from some of our senior officials, and then you have questions by the media. And it's important that we don't let the conversation go too far down the road without making sure those other segments you want to coordinate in a way where everybody's getting the same level of information roughly at the same time. Otherwise, what happens is, the old saying, knowledge is power. What you don't want to do is get the legislative branch or the executive branch or the media armed with more information than the other. This has to be an incremental, methodical march forward, and everybody has to come along for the conversation. And so that takes a lot of coordination, and advising people on what can be done to improve the 180-day report, and what can we do to improve the collection of this type of information and the analysis. All those things require conversation, and you have one opportunity to do it right and a whole bunch of opportunities to do it wrong. So it's everything has to be very deliberate and methodical.
So I'm just going to ask, what is going on? What is the IG now monitoring and looking at, and what made you go there? Are you being are you the advisor because of your experience before, or are you helping them set a strategy to bring something to the public?
Yeah, well, the IG evaluation was something that was done independently of myself. I'm not going to say I didn't help that conversation, but the point being is they made an internal decision within the department to evaluate the last 3 years of how the Pentagon's been handling this information. I think there was enough inconsistency there where people inside the Pentagon are realizing that they're probably going to have to make some changes and fix a few things. And so this evaluation, I think, is an honest attempt to try to do that. In a large bureaucracy, the role of the Inspector General is to take complaints and also investigate things.
Who's complaining?
Me for one. I mean, I think we've seen that the Pentagon's position over the last 3 years. We just saw it again with AATIP. Now they're coming out and reversing their position yet again. At first they said AATIP was about UAP. Then they came back and said AATIP had nothing to do with UAP. Now they've come out this week and say AATIP had something to do with UAP. I mean, it's to the point now where I think people are losing faith and confidence in our Department of Defense, and that is more dangerous than anything flying in our skies. Once people lose faith and confidence in their institutions, then we've got some real soul searching to do. We've got to make some decisions, and we got to make them quick. So I applaud the Department of Defense for doing this. Obviously, if I can assist, I will. What capacity I am or am not playing in this evaluation, I really can't discuss. I was told specifically not to share any questions or details involving my interactions with the DoD IG, and so I will respect that.
And I will respect that too. Had to ask though.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next one. So Louis, or Lue, you as well as Mr. Mellon, Rubio, Sean Cale, David Fravor, Alex Dietrich are now coming forward. So the UAP disclosure looks inevitable, right? It's confirmed UAPs are real. That it's confirmed. You know, the Pentagon confirmed it, the government confirmed it, whatever it is. Have you? You have been targeted by some people within the government, but you have also been protected by very influential people like Harry Reid. And now you're represented by Sheehan. Does he give you the ability to more safely disclose more to us?
Sure. So let me first address you said that disclosure is inevitable. I'm not sure I share that opinion just yet. I think it's far more likely at this point. I think we're getting very, very close, but there is still some pockets of resistance, and that resistance is fierce, and that has culminated in actions against myself and against others. I'm not going to go into detail what those actions are, but there have been some consequences and some things directed towards me because of that. So I don't think we're quite there yet. The purpose of Mr. Sheehan representing me is quite simple. He is the #1 constitutional attorney, Harvard-trained attorney with an incredible track record. And I think he's more than qualified to handle this issue. This is a person who is involved in things such as Watergate and Silkwood and the Pentagon Papers and Iran-Contra. So he is, there's a reason why they call him the people's advocate. Now, with that said, let me caveat here. His opinions are his opinions, and my opinions are my opinions. And he is in no way influencing me, and I am in no way influencing him. We are working together for the common good of disclosure. It doesn't mean you have to agree on personal opinions. I know there's been some discussion about the threat angle here. Look, you know, the bottom line is we don't have enough data yet to make any type of conclusions. You know, there's just as much data suggesting it's not a threat as there is to say it is a threat. So we simply don't know. My personal views on that are frankly irrelevant. What matters is that we have to, I think we all agree that in the end of the day, that the phenomenon of UAP is real, and we need to figure out what it is. And that seems to be resonating with people in very senior positions, because it's a very matter-of-fact, common sense approach. It's not fear-mongering. It's not irresponsible. You know, the opposite can be if we say that it's not a threat completely. Well, you know, I'm not willing to gamble the safety of my family on that. You know, if somebody wants to believe that, then they're certainly entitled to feel that way. And if they believe it is a threat, then they're certainly entitled to feel that way as well. Or, you know what, if they don't have an opinion yet, that's also, they're entitled to feel that way. And that's the basis of this discussion. And I think that's maybe why it's becoming so polarized, is that there's people on both sides that are equally adamant that it is or it is not a threat. And, you know, that's probably difficult for some folks to, you know, try to meet in the middle, so to speak, of that conversation.
Yes. Okay. The threat thing is interesting because, you know, we've talked about this before, that there is a pattern we can see throughout the decades. They tend to show up at the places where there's nuclear weapons, for example, but they also approach, you know, planes with travelers very closely, which could be very dangerous. Or taking out the nukes of a power, and, you know, the adversary might take it as a threat or something. You know, all the kinds of things can happen. But I hear there is another IG investigation pending, and that might be overseas on my side of the pond. Do you know anything about that?
You know, I'm gonna refer back to what I was asked by the IG, and that is to not comment on anything specific regarding any potential investigation or inquiry. At least not now. I'm speaking with Mr. Sheehan. He is my counsel. I'm approaching this from very much a legal perspective. I want to allow the system to work the way it's supposed to work before I come in and start, if you will, smashing up furniture and dinnerware. I'm trying to take the path of least resistance on this, and I'll probably stick with that for now. That may change, but you know, I've got to let the system try to work.
All right. Well, I would love to know if it's going to be in my country. because that's very exciting for me. And I hope it's Soesterberg. You know, people are dying to know more about the Soesterberg case. I'm really pursuing that too, especially my friends Bram Rosa and Alex Griffioen. Shout out, guys. There have been many attempts by the Pentagon some people in the Pentagon or the government to downplay your leading part in AATIP. Senator Reid has multiple times interfered and confirmed you were definitely in charge of AATIP and endorsed your leadership, actually, which was great. What seems to be the resistance that drives some people in the government to try to disqualify your role or downplay your role within that organization? Because it looks like everybody's contradicting each other at this point.
Yeah. Look, I was a product of national security and the intelligence community and the Department of Defense for my entire career. And I chose to break rank. I broke rank, and that is something that is definitely considered a no-no in my former line of work. When you break ranks, you're going to have the system is going to send out its antibodies, and they're going to try to first what they're going to do is ignore you. And then when they can't ignore you, they're going to go ahead and contradict you. When they can't contradict you, they're going to try to call you a liar. And then when they can't do that, they're going to obfuscate. They're going to try to come back with these general terms to say, you know, to save face. And then finally, at the end of the day, you know, comes acknowledgement. But we're not to that phase yet. I think we're moving there.
Well, what you're doing is almost divine. Of course, you know, you are carrying a burden, and you know it's very clear. You know, it's being fought on social media, in newspapers, etc. So please hang in there, sir. We all root for you, and that's why we keep on, you know, talking to you and try to learn more. So
I appreciate it.
We are not gonna stop this. Nobody here in the chat, nobody who's watching, guys, keep on watching. All right, we're gonna pursue this. Okay, so this is interesting. You talked about one of your encounters with officers, and one of them actually told you, Louis, you don't have to investigate this anymore. The UAP phenomenon, we already know what it is. You know, it's very infamous now. It's ghosts and demons and warlocks. I don't know, a witch on a stick, on a broom. But what do you think the resistance within the government is a religious resistance? Is it because it's going to change everything we know as mankind or religion, for example, our place in the universe? You know, we are not the center of the universe if this turns out to be true, if it turns out to be extraterrestrial. But is this what you are actually fighting there?
No, not really, Max. You know, I think people are entitled to their opinions and their positions. And I think we have to be cautious within the UFO community to throw stones at people who have a religious bias in the Pentagon, because we have that exact same bias and zealotry within the UFO community right now. There are people that are absolutely convinced that they have the answers and that their narrative is based in facts, and you know they are trying very hard to convince people to support their position, and they don't want people to look into this because anything that does not comport to their narrative, they're going to fight. And I've been the subject of plenty of these baseless attacks. You know, honestly, it doesn't really bother me because these people they're not influential, you know. So right. You know, thankfully they're individuals who don't, you know, yeah, I hate to say this, but you know, they're not important to this topic. So, you know, and I'll tell you something else too, Max. I hate to go down this road, but look, here's an example. Cosmology 101. The Earth is safe because there's this big gas giant called Jupiter that is out there, and its gravitational force sucks in all the wayward debris and trash in the solar system, and it kind of gets locked into this death spiral in Jupiter's orbit, and we don't have to deal with it. Well, very much to the same degree. A lot of individuals out in the UFO community that have been selling these false narratives attract a certain type of individual. And those individuals tend to orbit around these cults of personality, which for me is actually doing me a favor, because that means I don't have to deal with them. I don't have to deal with the nonsense and the garbage. I can just focus on the topic and disclosure and transparency for people who are rational minded and really want to know. I'm not interested in cult narratives. I'm not interested in selling a UFO tour and paying some dude to drop flares out of a plane. I've got more important things to do than that.
You are incredibly right, sir. I do think religion or beliefs do not rule out whatever is happening. I think it could go hand in hand, actually, or not. But if you, for example, take the Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, there's a lot about energy and the connection with nature, the universe, one another. It might even be relevant to the topic. So I'll
I agree with you, Max. I think when you look at this, like every other time crossroads where religion and science have tended to bump heads, we realize that there really isn't a conflict. It just seems that way in the very beginning. But when we were first introduced to the notion that the Earth was not the center of the solar system, there were people in the clergy that refused to look through the telescope. And here we are now realizing actually that observation has actually supported religion. It all it does is reinforce the grandeur of the notion of God and a creator and the magnificence of the universe. And so I don't think they necessarily have to be in conflict.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's just we don't know for certain.
Right.
And but that's fine. I don't mind not knowing yet. Let me see. Okay, so I'm going to address the elephant in the room. Get ready. You were at Tucker Carlson and you stated that there is UAP material in American government hands that can be investigated. What does exotic material comprehend? Have you seen it and have you investigated it?
I have stated that my belief is that the U.S. government is in possession. When I say U.S. government or its organizations, institutions, and companies, contractors that work for it, are in possession of very exotic material that may very well not be from here. I have said that for the record. I have seen material and I've seen documentation that supports that. I've seen analysis that supports that conclusion. I think it's a little bit probably at this point premature. We still need to do more analysis. We need to have, of course, a scientific methodology followed. It needs to be peer reviewed, repeatable, all the things that we require in the scientific community to establish the facts around something. But, at the end of the day, we have only had the technology over the last decade, maybe decade and a half, to do atomic engineering. And that is, when I say atomic, I mean precision nano engineering, being able to develop material with a precise atomic ratio, isotopic ratio, and have that isotopic ratio consistent and uniform throughout the material. That's very, very complex, very, very expensive, very, very technical. And when you have material in your possession, in your hand, that predates any of that technology, and it's clearly engineered, then you're forced to come to the conclusion that someone made it, something made it. And
so are we talking about an archaeological find?
I'm not going to go into details of the provenance of the material.
Well, it reminds me of Bob Lazar's story that he was back engineering, if it's true, I don't know, a actual UFO that was dug up somewhere. It was an archaeological find. So it reminds me of that story. I will
say this. Some people have made the claim that I've seen a quote unquote UFO in a hangar. That is incorrect. That was someone who had misunderstood a conversation that took place. But that never occurred. I have not been to a hangar where there is an intact UFO craft or anything like that. That was definitely a miscommunication. Someone heard something, and I think probably may have extrapolated that, but that I never said that.
Yeah, and I'll stick with that. This is going to be Bob Lazar's story forever now. So, okay. Okay. Oh, what also was, stated on the 60 Minutes, the military men also said the footage, the witness account information, data about UAPs, they come in on a regular basis from the American forces. Yeah. So, and a lot of it is still classified. So now we have learned about the 5 observables you use to determine if the craft is in fact UAP. Thus unknown to the American Armed Forces. In our last interview, we touched down on DNA. DNA is terrestrial, it's every living organism on this planet. And you said not necessarily all life forms in the universe have DNA to test, like a virus, they have something that's called NRA. Now, I was wondering, what is that, and were you able to retrieve that from the investigation scenes?
Ooh, I'm going to pass on that question. Going into specifics of what was collected, how it was collected, and the analysis is not up to me right now to have that conversation. But there are certainly signatures that we have here on this planet of living things. I don't think it's a surprise to many that we invest millions of dollars each year trying to find some sort of life either within our solar system or within our galaxy, whether it be technosignatures or microbial life on Mars or whatever. As my dear friend and colleague put it recently, Christopher Mellon, he said, we're trying to find life out there. What if that life found us first? And I think that's very intriguing. I think when you look at the age of this planet and how long this planet has been here and how long life forms have been here, is it possible that something else found us first?
Well, yeah, definitely. Let me see. When you did the interview with Stephen Greenstreet of the New York Post, you said, you treat the UAP investigations as it were a crash site, a car crash or a plane crash or whatever. Stephen took from that there has been biological material retrieved. So there could have been molecular property that could be studied or cellular property. You said there was no DNA, but there was another biological chemical that's equivalent to human DNA. Can we know a little bit more about that? Because, of course, if you treat it like that, there is something, biological, so alive to investigate.
Yeah, I think there may be some confusion there. I think what I was trying to communicate is that there were indicators that these things were being intelligently controlled and that there was some sort of intelligence, life that was controlling these things. Not necessarily, a body, so to speak. There is some discussion that there may have been some sort of biological samples obtained. The details of that will probably have to come out through other channels. I've been privy to some discussion, but the problem, it's just that, and we have to be very, very careful. I don't want to say anything that can't be substantiated. That's important. The only reason why we're having this conversation right now like this is because we've been very careful not to make claims that can't be substantiated. By the way, you mentioned our pilots, some of the finest individuals I've ever had the honor and pleasure to serve with. These people are true heroes. People like Alex Dietrich, who I couldn't reveal her identity before, but she's now gone public, and Dave Fravor and Jim Slade and Ryan Graves. These folks are, first of all, they are heroes because we worked with them in combat, but more importantly, because they're having the conversation now and they're willing to risk their jobs. Alex is still in the U.S. military. She is.
Yeah.
I won't go into detail on what she does, but she still wears her uniform and proudly serves. And there's a lot more individuals in uniform that haven't had their story told yet. But some of these stories are absolutely riveting, and there is information, just compelling information and data that backs up their eyewitness testimony. And my hope is that the American people and the world will get a chance to see that, because it's incredible. It's absolutely riveting.
Well, of course, we are very curious now. You also stated technology you are seeing, or we are seeing, is not that far away, maybe less than 100 years. Now, Sean Cahill stated it could be between 100 and 1,000 years advanced technology, right? How did the scientists you were working with come to the conclusion it's not that far separated from us and we can actually, work with this? And that, if you have that conclusion, that could only mean that that you are so close that you had the chance to observe this tech from up close, to determine if it was that advanced. Now, had they had the chance to do that, or
So first of all, Sean Cahill is not incorrect. I made an assessment that we could be 100 or a couple hundred years. It may be 100, it might be 1,000, but really on the grand scale of human evolution, the difference between 100 years and 1,000 years is a blink of an eye. It's really not that long. From our perspective, it is, because in a single human lifespan, we're looking at, for lucky, 80 years plus or minus. But in the grand scheme of things and the scale of the species, it's really a blink of an eye. How we came to that conclusion were based upon the mathematical formulas and the scientific models that we now believe we have potentially a basic understanding of what's actually occurring. And because of that, we realize it does potentially fit into the existing models of physics, quantum physics. And that there can be some micro scale experiments done with existing technology potentially to prove some of this. And so that's why I think when you talk to a lot of the scientists who are involved in this, they kind of tell you the same thing. And by the way, every year that passes, we get a little closer to understanding some of these bizarre forms of physics. And so what may seem like, 10,000 years, 20,000 years of human evolution may really, in fact, only be, 100 years or 1,000 years. Look how far, if you take the last century, several academics have said there has been more innovation in that one century than all the other innovations in the entire history of mankind.
That is true.
And we continue to see, from the late 1800s to the late 1800s to the late 1900s, we went from horse and buggy to landing on the moon. Right. And think about that for a moment. In the span of almost just one lifetime, we created a global environment where virtually any person on the planet can talk. We're having a conversation over Zoom right now, you and I, and we're on opposite ends of the planet. This is real. This is happening now. And so I think we need to keep that in mind, that the human species, if anything, always moves forward, is always evolving.
Yeah. We are evolving as mankind really fast, what you said, the last 100 years. But, a lot of people argue it might be because there is some other intelligence we can learn from and use to create what we have been creating the last 100 years. So on that note, my next question: signatures collection. We've talked about this. Has there ever been something collected that proves intelligence or technology unknown to Earth?
We have signatures collection data that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is advanced technology.
Right.
The question is, what are the origins of that advanced technology, and what is the likelihood that its origins are from us? That's the $1 million question, and we are getting closer to that answer every day. I think common sense at the end of the day is going to prevail. I think more and more people are realizing that this technology, as incredible as it is, it's been around for an awful long time, and we simply did not have the technology when we were encountering these things. And so, for that reason, I don't think it's out of the realm to start speculating on other origins. I think if you strip away the stigma and the taboo, that's probably the scientifically prudent thing to do, is start looking at other possibilities, right?
Right. So if you look at other origins, that means like earthly origins, right?
Yeah, it means other than from here on this planet, or here in our understanding of the planet. There are still a lot of options that this could be. These things could be from here, but exist in a fundamentally different way and interact with the environment in a fundamentally different way than we do. There's all sorts of possibilities, and so as I've said before, from day one, we don't know if they're from outer space, inner space, or the space in between. And I think it's hard for people to wrap their head around that. I understand it's difficult because people say, "Well, what do you mean?"
It might have been a parallel life form we have a hard time observing, for some reason.
Sure.
And that would mean from Earth, but also could be extraterrestrial. Now, let me see. Yeah, you have been talking about the parallel life form I'm talking about. The time bubble theory based on Einstein's work. Now, how did that come about? Is that only based on what has been observed by you now?
No, actually, there was a lot of papers and technical papers done. And there were, I remember, I won't say who was there, but we had some scientists, I remember specifically sitting in the skiff and having a conversation, and they spent about half an hour writing a mathematical formula that I frankly didn't understand. It took up, 3 whiteboards, and at the very end, they came to a less than zero function at the end. I said, well, what does that mean? And they said, well, what it means is that, if you can do this, then in essence, it is the warping of space-time in a localized area that would allow you to achieve all these other observables. So rather than being a separate exotic technology to explain instantaneous acceleration or hypersonic velocity or transmedium travel or all these other things, that if you can do this, if you can bring this equation down to a less than zero, then all this now becomes manifestation of a single technology. It all becomes possible. So that's those were some of the conversations that occurred.
Well, it's very technical, very scientific. Now, you have been talking about the 5 observables. My question to you: what's the 6th?
Well, maybe there's more. Maybe there's 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, I heard.
The 6 is biological effects. But we may find there may be many other observables. These are just the observables that AATIP was able to really reconcile. And we don't have answers, right? We have observations, but we don't have definitive answers yet on how that's being achieved. We've got some theories, and those theories seem to be holding up. But we still have a lot more questions than we have answers. And as far as observables, probably as many as your imagination can hold. Probably, I imagine that smarter people are going to continue to look at this topic and come up with a whole bunch of other observables.
Yeah, I do have a question, but I'm first going to ask this one because I think it's relevant. So this is the question, are there differences in behavior traits or skill sets depending on the shape of the UAP? For example, is a tic tac different from a disc or an orb different from a triangle? Or are they maybe all from the same source, or do they seem completely different? Are there differences?
Well, they're clearly there are differences, but they may be utilizing the same or similar technologies. And the difference between a disc versus a rod, or if you will, a cigar shaped, and that versus a triangle or even a boomerang, may simply be a result of the propulsion that is being used and the intent and purpose of the vehicle. So, for example, if I wanted a sports car, for example, let's say that the warping of space-time in a localized area is finite. Let's say you have this bubble that can only be so big. Just for argument's sake, let's say 43 feet. You can only fit a certain size automobile inside that bubble, a vehicle, right? And so a disc, if you were to have this bubble, right, and you were to take create a car that this bubble is surrounding you on all equal sides, the shape of the car you would want to make sure that you are uniformly fitting inside this bubble is a sphere, because the bubble is a sphere. But a two-dimensional representation is a disc. And if you're driving in a car that's shaped like a disc and this bubble you want to protect you on all sides equally, a disc would be a perfect way to do that. So think of let's say a Corvette. You can fit two people in a Corvette and you can, go really fast. But let's say a Corvette isn't big enough. Let's say you need a school bus. You need a lot of people to fit in and a lot of equipment. Well, you could put two of these discs together and have these, if you will, overlapping bubbles. But two discs together is really, you could just draw the line complete. You have now a cigar. That those two discs, you could have a propulsion unit here and a propulsion unit here, and now all of a sudden you've got these two bubbles that are still protecting you equally. Right. And then, of course, there's another shape and geometry that if you needed something really big, really big, like an aircraft carrier, let's say a triangle, right? So you know what? I'll let me show you something real quick. So,
yeah.
Let's say this little, I don't know if you can see that here. That is your disc, and you've got this bubble surrounding your disc. Okay. Now let's say you put another UAP here. Okay. And so now you have these interlocking bubbles. So here is the two, but really those two, what you can do is draw a line between them. And now you have that, right? So now you have this cigar-looking vehicle where you have a propulsion unit here on this side and a propulsion unit over here. There's another shape and geometry. Think of a three-legged stool that if I go out 90 degrees from the middle here and I put another propulsion unit here like that, okay, what that is in essence is nothing more than a triangle. Right. And so now you have a propulsion here, you have one here, you have one up here.
Guys, do you see that?
And now what you have are, think of a three-legged stool. You have propulsion units providing you equally all over the ship. And that's maybe why these triangles are so big. And that's one of the hypotheses. So
this is by far the coolest thing I've heard in weeks.
Well, it's speculation right now, but it seems to be, if you look at the principles of the type of energy needed to create these bubbles, there's an old saying in the Navy, how many nuclear reactors do you put on a ship? Well, the answer is as few as possible, because if something goes wrong with it, the whole thing, your bubble pops.
Yeah, but this makes so much sense. It's like they are able to merge, but also, move separately from certain jobs or something.
Well,
But,
some of the
you know,
lights
this,
that people see, the flashing lights, actually may be a Doppler shift. So if you take this again and you look at that,
yeah,
depending how much, if you will, juice, how strong that bubble is, potentially that will redshift, blue shift light and energy. So what you perceive as a green light or a red light or a yellow light may in fact be a result of those propulsion. If this is the case, if these are propulsion units,
yeah.
what you're seeing is a distortion in that energy, and you're getting these interesting colors going back and forth. And so that may be, you know, one of the explanations that people
Yeah.
have been throwing around.
But yeah, of course, there's the famous footage of I think it was the Puerto Rican the footage of the UAP going under and coming up
Correct.
into. Right. So exactly what you just told me is happening over there.
Well,
You know.
I'll show you something else if I can. I don't know if I have a piece of paper, but there's a very elegant way that was explained to me by some of the scientists. I'll probably have to show you some other time. But it's a very elegant way of explaining the localization, the warping of space-time in a localized area, and why we see what we see from the outside. It's a very, very compelling argument that was proposed to us, and it seems to make a lot of sense.
Well, you know, I was wondering, look, why is one a pyramid? Why is one a disc? And now,
Right.
you know, it completely makes sense. All right. So let's move on.
But I want to caution with that. That's still right now. It's still speculation. It's one of the theories that's being proposed. It seems to make a lot of sense. It seems logical, but we're going to need a lot more data
Louis,
to substantiate that.
We've seen it. We've seen the footage. No, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Let me see. Yeah. On that note, you know, when I observe these crafts, you know, we've talked, I think, before about consciousness and you know, the manipulation of gravity. But also, you know, there seems to be something going on with energy, and I was wondering, is energy one of the observables, one of the, you know, signatures?
Well, you know, energy is fundamentally it's everywhere and it's everything. Matter and energy have a very interesting relationship, and I'm not sure a lot of people really appreciate it. But when you look at the equation E equals mc squared, that really says a lot. And energy and matter on the opposite sides of those equations, they're almost inverses of each other. Meaning, if matter is comprised of energy, just very tightly held packets of energy. So when you take matter and you annihilate it, you get pure energy. And if you take energy and you slow it down, you condense it, you begin to get matter. You start getting these primordial pieces that make up the atom, right? These subatomic pieces. And so think of energy and matter as really the same thing in two different states. Think of ice, a cube of ice, as matter, right? It's hard. You can touch it. You can break it. And think of steam as being energy, right? Highly energetic. They're both water. They're just in different states. And so matter is in a much more condensed state, whereas energy is in a much more active state. And you know, signatures of energy are this entire universe is just one huge signature of energy. And now, of course, we have energy in the absence of energy, right? We have this thing called dark energy that we can't even explain. We can't see it. We can't measure it. And yet many scientists believe it's there. In fact, that's the dominant amount of energy. That's the dominant energy form in the known universe. And so, and yet we can't even interact with it. And so I think it's important to note that whenever we talk about energy, you know, let's look at it from a scientific perspective. What is energy? You know, there's enough energy in my if I were to take a thimble full of you know, of me and put it into a thimbleful, if I were to convert that into energy instantaneously, it would have the same yield as an atomic bomb. So we are all walking packets of energy. There's no way around it. So when we say we're looking for signatures of energy, yes, almost by definition, anything and everything in our universe is energy. It's just in a various state of energy.
Right. So water is energy. You know, there's a lot of energy in water. Do you think these UAPs who just go under? There was some point you were saying it might be a fueling thing or a source of energy for the UAPs.
So let's no, exactly. So let's go back to this drawing here, right? These energy, these let's call them, if you want, propulsion units or whatever. If this is the way it goes, there's two ways to warp space-time that we know of. The first one is with a lot of matter, a lot of mass, right? Like the mass of Earth is perturbing space-time around it. The mass of Jupiter perturbs space-time even more, and the mass of the sun even more, right? Until eventually you have something like a black hole where space-time almost becomes nonsensical. All matter distorts space-time, but so does energy. It just turns out you need a lot more of that energy to warp space-time. So let's go back to our analogy of ice cube and steam. If I take a bed sheet, let's say that's space-time, perfectly flat, no distortions, and I put an ice cube right in the middle of the bed, I'm going to get some wrinkles right around the bed sheet, and that is the warping of space-time in that localized area. That's a kind of a crude way of looking at it. Well, if I wanted to create that same level of distortion, I would need a steam gun, right, to shoot it down at the bed with a lot more steam to create that same effect. Well, you need a lot of energy to warp space-time, and you need a lot of it. And so there is a discussion that if you wanted to create that level of energy, to create that yield, you would need an energy source. And one of the simplest and most, if you will, abundant elements in the known universe is hydrogen. And hydrogen, if I wanted to break apart, so that when you go from, we're going to get to a physics lesson here, and I'm not a physicist. When you go from big to small, if I take a glass of water and I convert it to steam, that's a 1 × 10 to the third yield, energy yield. And it took Archimedes with his steam engine to figure it out. And we have locomotives in the 1800s that we use. It wasn't until the 11th century and the Chinese who invented gunpowder, and that was breaking down matter even further to the molecular, breaking apart the molecular bonds, and there was an exothermic release of energy, and that's a 1 × 10 to the 4th yield of energy.
Right.
Turns out, of course, last century we figured about the secrets of the atom, and once we learned how to split apart an atom, that was through fission. That was a 1 × 10 to the 5th yield, or what we express as a kiloton yield of energy release. And then we have a nuclear bomb, right, really big, and then you get into nuclear. Now you start breaking up the nucleus of an atom, and you have a 1 × 10 to the 6th yield, which is known as a megaton example of yield of energy. And so forth and so forth. And so the smaller you go down in matter, the more energy is tightly held together. But when it's released, it's exponential. And so it's quite possible that we're seeing the same thing here, that these UAP are mining hydrogen, and not in a nebulous cloud, but in water, because water, it's the only place in the universe where you can mine hydrogen in the density that it's in, because it's locked into that oxygen. It is extremely abundant. You don't have to spend 100 years mining a gas nebula. You have all the hydrogen you could possibly need with 1 bucket full of water, let's say, in the ocean, right? So it could very well be that has been speculated that the oceans are some sort of fuel supply because of the abundance of hydrogen.
Wow. Everything's good, just comes together now. Of course, it's not proven yet, but it really makes sense to me. Okay, so let me ask you about the Pice effect and its associated patents. Have you ever heard about that?
Of course. Salvatore is a good scientist. He's doing what he should do.
You know the man?
I know of Salvatore Pice, and I know of his patents. He's actually referenced one of my former colleagues, Dr. Hal Puthoff, in some of his patents. Um, yes, I'm aware of his work.
His work kind of looks like what you just drew.
Yeah, a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. But, because he has these patterns and it's so similar to what you just, what we observe, what we see. It could be that he uses whatever we observe with the science that comes along with that to create a human-made vehicle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've spent a lot of money so far, doing some experiments. When I say a lot, obviously not millions and millions, but from where I come from, $500,000, $800,000 is still pretty significant. I don't think we should necessarily, underestimate some of the scientific principles that Salvatore Pais has pushed forward. Now, for the caveat, I'm not a physicist. I can't tell you definitively because there's a lot of scientists that disagree with his principles. What I support is him taking a risk and bucking the scientific community to try to prove a principle. It's no different than Tesla or other greats that we've had. Many of these folks were considered crazy for pushing some of these theories forward, and it turns out that they were right. Again, I can't tell you if Salvatore Pais's mathematics is correct. I never quite got that high in calculus in college, but I applaud his courage for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm very curious about that. I hope someday, we can see a man-made vehicle like that. Okay, so that's a stupid question, Max. Sorry, I'm not going to even read that. Yeah, maybe I should ask though.
Go ahead.
Is consciousness observable energy?
So I was asked something similar the other day, and people say, is it possible that consciousness drives these vehicles? Well, my first response is, what do you mean by consciousness? Because if you mean the human brain and the cognitive capabilities of the human brain, the answer is absolutely yes, because we're doing it now. Every time I go to the grocery store, I get into my automobile, I'm making a conscious decision to put the car from park to drive. I'm making a conscious decision to drive within the speed limit and stay within the lane. And by the way, this is all occurring in my brain, and it's telling my body what to do. So I'm making a conscious decision to take my vehicle to the grocery store. So one can argue that yes, your car is being driven by human consciousness. Now, if we want to go this step further and say, can the brain actually control things? Well, we know there's experiments at DARPA right now where pilots can be sitting in a room with a helmet on and fly a drone completely with their thoughts. Okay, that's a fact. That's not science fiction. That's actually occurring. No. So the fact that you can have a technological interface that can interpret brain signals and then turn that into some sort of output by a technical device isn't science fiction. And one could say that, yeah, you're flying a drone with human consciousness. Ultimately, that may be a far more efficient way of controlling something, a technical device in the future. We may not be able to get to that point right now, but perhaps in 100 years, everybody's going to be driving their car by sitting in it and just thinking about going to the grocery store. So,
right.
That's how I would respond to that.
Yeah. Of course, consciousness is visible. For example, you get a horrible accident and your arm gets chopped off and you get like a, bionic arm, and you can move it with your nervous system.
Right. You're absolutely right. I mean, we know through brain waves, that's how we can tell if somebody is deceased or not, through brainwave activity. The human consciousness does give out electromagnetic frequencies. That's a fact. We can detect those and we can measure those, and so.
Okay. All right. Let me see. I have a couple of questions, but people were so excited I was going to interview you. They asked me if they could submit questions to me. So I'm going to go on social media and check. I have a couple already for you.
Sure.
But I'll finish this. I just want everybody, to feel involved because, I'm not the only one with questions. I just have the platform. So let me see. Yeah, we covered that. Um, and, oh yeah, have you seen the Clavinet photo? The one they are not releasing, but it's supposed to be there. Or Kavir? I think I misread that. The place.
Are you referring to the which
Kelvin.
photograph?
Kelvin. I'll get to it later. I'll have to check it out. Let me see. Okay, so now there's news. The Japanese are going to investigate UAPs. What do you think about that?
I think it's great. I think that they're reaching out. They've already reached out to the United States and offered to enter into a bilateral relationship to share UAP information with our country, and vice versa. I applaud that initiative. My response would be, it's about time.
Yeah, I see what it was. It was Kelvin, Scotland. That photo. There's a photo. It's supposed to be the best photo ever taken of a UAP. And have you seen it?
I am aware of that photograph. I have not had the privilege of seeing that particular photograph, but I am aware of it.
You are aware of it. Well, to get back to Japan, because there's some questions about it. When the Fukushima disaster happened, the nuclear breakdown, there were accounts and reports of a huge UAP activity there, and we are talking beams. We're talking them flying around. Have you ever, investigated that case?
Well, let me respond by saying this: it wasn't just Fukushima; it was also Chernobyl as well.
Okay, there was a lot of UAP activity at Chernobyl as well. And correct. Is this information Russians shared with you?
I'm not going to go into the nature and origin of that information. I have it on a high degree of confidence that was also occurring during the Chernobyl catastrophe.
Okay, so we have accounts in Fukushima and Chernobyl. Let me see. And was this something that was intensively investigated by the American government? It looks like a big event.
I mean, it was certainly well known. When I was in AATIP, our focus was primarily on U.S. military service members and their encounters with UAPs. We were aware of the Fukushima information, but that was not our focus. We did not have the ability to engage with other foreign countries on a bilateral relationship regarding this topic. It was just simply too sensitive at the time.
Yeah, I get it. So let me see what I have here.
And Max, if you can remind me, just so I know our time on this, because these unfortunately tend to go out after a certain time, and I don't want to be in a conversation all of a sudden, lights out.
All right. So we are in for more than an hour and 15 minutes. I shall not take too much of your time. Let me ask one more question.
We should be good for another 15 minutes, but I think these are good for about an hour and a half, and then they shut off. The battery wears out.
All right. Okay, I'll try to put this all in 15 minutes. What should be no problem. So let me see. Okay, so we talked. There wasn't talk about the Roswell crash site before. So the rumor, of course, is that that there was debris recovered. Also, there was the Los Angeles UAP incident in 1942. Is it possible, this is debris that is still being investigated by the U.S. government, if it is actually recovered?
Well, I think people are now beginning to realize, and I kind of gave a few hints before, but Roswell may not have been the first event, and well known. I mean, there's been some some reporting internationally as well that there have been some crashed vehicles, and they were obtained by local authorities, and there was some scientific study done on them. I want to be very careful not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but I've seen personally some documentation that's very compelling from a particular foreign country where they had a recovery of a vehicle, and
Okay.
they had some countries conducting scientific analysis on it, and after World War II, allegedly, parts of that vehicle were brought to the United States.
Yeah, I think I know what country that was. It was a South American country, I think. Maybe Brazil. No, you know. Damn it! Argentina. I'm not sure. Well, I think it's
Italy. Italy.
Yeah, it was Italy.
Yeah, that's as it was explained to me. I saw some documentation. Look, I don't want to get too much into the conspiracy side of the house. There is some documentation that has been validated that was from Mussolini himself, and it's authentic. It's been proven to be authentic. The documentation, so certainly interesting.
And this was Mussolini, so this could have been pre-Second War or during Second War. So it is pre-Roswell. Well, guys, there's something you can look into. Okay, so I'm very curious about that. I'm gonna go into that. Let me see. Well, we've talked about my Soesterberg case, but I don't think I've ever asked you anything about the Rua, Zimbabwe case, where a UAP appeared next to a school, and a lot of witnesses, children, saw not just the UAP, but also to life forms, to humanoid life forms. Is that anything you have ever investigated?
Well, I would ask you a question as well. Are you aware what was close to that school? What was in close proximity to that school?
No, I don't know.
A uranium mine.
Right. Okay. A uranium mine. And I know there were a lot of witness accounts even the day before at nighttime, people seeing, UAPs flying around. But all of these child witnesses, did you guys, or I know for a fact a psychologist went up there, a Harvard psychiatrist, I'm sorry, did a lot of interviews, and he said the kids were truthful. It wasn't like a mass hysteria, or they were fed information, and they still actually talk about it a lot. Even James Fox in his film The Phenomenon, he interviewed a lot of them as adults. But I think this is one of the most impactful events because of all of those witnesses ever. So that must have been very interesting for AATIP or for you and the people you work with to really get into that. But you already said there was a uranium mine, so this might have been, like an energy pit stop for these things or something. And why would they show themselves to children?
Well, again, we don't know. What's interesting is that, again, you have this potential nuclear connection, right? Technology
Right.
and whatnot. It's just. I think it's certainly worth exploring. It's interesting that you have this massive sighting in and around an area where there's a uranium mine. Is there a connection? We do believe that there is a nuclear connection of some sort between UAP activity and nuclear technology and capabilities and power and weapons.
Yeah.
Question is what is that? What is the interest? Why? It's again, there's some theories right now. Completely, it's pure conjecture at this point. But some of them seem pretty reasonable.
Okay. So there was also a lot of accounts of these children saying, these creatures or beings were communicating with them telepathically, which a lot of them said. Is this something you have ever heard before? That there was a sighting and there was like they said there was communication like that telepathically.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I think. Once again, I think to take the woo out of the conversation, animals communicate non-verbally,
Right.
and it's a part of their survival. Whether it's birds, dogs, cats, there are these non-verbal cues that animals can communicate with each other. To us, it seems like magic because we don't perceive it, and it seems kind of bizarre. But it's possible that humans, maybe long time ago, had the same type of survival technique. And as we've developed language and we become more of a global community, the need for us to have that became less and less important as our vocabulary began to become more dominant. And so very much like the human appendix, is it possible that it's a vestigial capability that we no longer use it, but some people still have it maybe. That's maybe, I guess what I'm trying to say here is we already talked about the fact that human beings can fly drones with their brains, right? With some interface technology. And frankly, it might even be a preferred, more efficient. Yeah. Consciousness might be a more efficient way to control things. It's not that far of a leap to then speculate, well, if it's that efficient, if it's more efficient to do things using the conscious brain, does that include communication? Well, sure, maybe it could.
Yeah.
There's a lot of studies my colleague did. Pardon me. during his time with the CIA, where we're looking at remote viewing to spy on foreign adversaries. And that is, that's they refer to that as a quote unquote psychic ability. And there's a lot of, data that suggests that it could be very real.
Okay, Louis, I'm going to go to some, I'm going to say fan questions, but people, who follow you anywhere. So I'm going to kick this off with my, let me see, my brother, Vinny Adams, the Disclosure team. He's covering this in Britain. You might have heard of him. He's a great guy. He's a friend of mine. Okay, question for Louis. Are you aware, or do you believe that there are people within the government or the military, either retired or still serving, who have important information, evidence on UAP, who could well leak or disclose this at some point in the future, maybe anonymously or through other channels?
I do. I think we're seeing it every day. I think every time a video comes out that's been leaked, it's from somebody that's on the inside, and they want the truth to come out. I do absolutely believe that there are people on the inside that have information and they want that information to be known.
Okay, so now I'm going to move on to my friend John Rash, who's also covering this. He also has a YouTube channel. Check out Sean. Let me see. Oh yeah, we actually touched down on this in the beginning. With Catholic conservatives coming out and speaking about this with an open mind, Newt Gingrich, Marco Rubio, John Radcliffe, are there still factions in the government that think the UAP is a demon? Oh yeah, we touched down on that. If so, what creates the difference of opinion between the before mentioned and the one who think these are evil? That's the question.
Well, look, I want to be careful because I tend to be spiritual myself and religious. I don't think it's a bad thing for people to approach things cautiously. What I have a problem with is when someone's ideas are now forced upon others, and especially in the course of scientific discovery. And it's not just a religious thing. We see it in politics every day. This is part of the challenges we face here in our country, is that people's political views become fact and then are imposed on other people. And it's not just politics as well. It's religion, it's politics, it's even in the scientific community where you have scientists now willing to come forward and have the conversation, but they are literally being heckled by their own peers. I saw an interview with Professor Avi Loeb where he was having a conversation, and one of his colleagues said, quote unquote, that they were really pissed off. That doesn't seem very scientific to me. You know, I have a science background. Why are you persecuting somebody who has alternative analysis? And that's my problem. It's not necessarily with religious fundamentalists or anybody else. It's any type of fundamentalist that will force their view upon everybody else to the point where they will squelch conversation. To me, that's the opposite of the scientific approach, and that's what I have a problem with.
Yeah, definitely. Let me show you something real quick. So this is a book. Let me see, right there. It's actually two books, one in black and white. These are written by a Dutch professor, engineer actually. Koen Vermeer is retired now, but I've interviewed him before. And this man was actually teaching, UFOs at the Dutch equivalent of MIT, right? And his colleagues, they did a work on him. You know, they discredited him. They basically, made his life impossible. But the man is writing books about UFO shapes, cases. But this is a real scientist, This is what happens to scientists who are all alone in that community. They tend to get destroyed.
Yeah, they get ridiculed, and I think that's a shame. I think it goes against the very ethos of what science is. It's closed-mindedness. It's analytic biasness, right? And that's a problem. Or I think we need to fight that at every opportunity we can.
Yeah, and it's definitely against all of their. As a scientist, you should pursue everything and then investigate everything.
As long as I agree with it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Pursue everything you want to pursue as long as I agree it's okay to do that, that's the problem. That's not the spirit of science.
No.
And Max, just I just got a warning on the bottom of my right screen. These are down to 5%.
All right, so I'm going to ask the last question. This one is from Alex Kifune. Okay. What is the most significant case you've come across during your time at AATIP? And do you know whether or not this will be included in next month's report? That's a really good question.
There are a lot of compelling incidents that I'm aware of. There's not one single one that's more compelling than any others because they all in their own right are compelling. That's the only reason why AATIP looked at them, because if they weren't compelling, if it was something that was easily explained, like a balloon or something like that, we didn't pay attention to it. We moved on. So asking me what was my favorite case was probably like asking me what my favorite child is. They're all unique and special in their own way. And the people I had a chance to talk with were special in their own way as well. And it was my honor and privilege to be able to work with them and have the conversation. As far as that being in the report for the 180-day report to Congress, I don't know what's going to be in the report. Unfortunately, what I'm hearing is it's going to be a whole lot of nothing. And I think that's a shame because we're squandering an opportunity here. And I think what we're going to wind up doing is just sowing more distrust within our government institution. Right. We have a chance to do it right. And we, if anything has taught us anything over the last 3 years is that, we should be more transparent and open with the American people. And we seem to be falling back into our old ways. And I hope that's certainly not the case, but it may very well be.
Well, Mr. Elizondo, before I'm going to say goodbye to you, I want to ask you if there's something you would like us to know or what is coming up. Is there something we should get ready for?
Max, no. What? Let me offer this though to you and to your viewers and your audience, wherever they may be. Thank you for what you're doing. It is making a difference. You are changing the global conversation And there's very few opportunities where, as a human being, we have a chance to be part of history. Most of the time, we are subject to witnessing history. Very few opportunities to actually make history, and you are making history. You and everybody in your audience who's having the conversation, you are part of this global conversation, and we are only having it because you have allowed it to happen. So thank you very much.
Well, the honor is all of my friends, all of the people who are covering this, and there's so many great people on the UFO Twitter, etc. Making now their own podcast, writing in magazines. I do it in Holland. I was I think one of the few, the only one, but now they start writing. So you guys, it does work. Keep covering it,
But there's only one Max.
Thank you. There's only one Mr. Lue Elizondo. I think your work is actually divine, almost prophetic. We are going to support you when and where all over the world. And thank you so much for everything you are doing. It's not easy. You compromise a lot, but you carry that cross. And thank you so much on behalf of all of us.
Thank you, Max. Anytime you want to do this, I'm always available to you.
Thank you, sir. And I hope to do it again. Thank you, Mr. Elizondo.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I love it. Bye.